It's wonderful to have someone here who's so expert in all of the policies and practices going on in China on the dams right now. Our next speaker is also a person who's heavily engaged in the practical realities of dams and power in America. Pat Mulroy is the general manager of the Las Vegas Valley Water District Southern Nevada Water Authority. She's actually responsible for the creation of a multi-state group that works together in water issues in the U.S., an amazing accomplishment. I know it took a lot of work. It serves over 340,000 customers and is responsible for acquiring, treating, and delivering water to the local agencies that collectively serve 2 million people and 40 million annual visitors. If you've been to Las Vegas and took a drink of water, thanks to Pat. She joined the district more than 20 years ago, began serving as the general manager in 1989. She's the principal architect of the authority, which has served as a model for other Western water agencies since its creation in 1991. As general manager of one of the country's most progressive water agencies, she's exceptionally active in regional and national water issues. In fact, that's how I met Pat. I was in Washington, D.C., where she came to give a presentation to a variety of U.S. government officials and companies that were meeting to discuss the water problems in D.C. She currently serves on the board of directors of the Association of Metropolitan Water Agencies and the National Water Resources Association, and on the board of trustees of the Water Research Foundation. She was the original chairperson of the Western Urban Water Coalition, served on the Colorado River Water Users Association's board of directors. She's a resident of Southern Nevada for more than 3 decades. She currently chairs the University of Nevada, Las Vegas Colleges of Sciences Advisory Board, and has also served on the Nevada Public Radio Board of Directors, a wide variety of things. Looking forward to your talk today. Pat Mulroy.
Do you want me to do it from here? Or?
Your mic's on.
Perfect.
So just pull it close to you so it goes well.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. I know that part of the country is considered inhospitable to many, but I want to tell you the story of a river system that in the 20s and 30s was developed and engineered with some of the nations in the world's largest and most impressive dam structures, and was confronted with a new reality at the turn of this century. I have to roll back the clock for you back to 1929 or 1922, when 7 states that are in the Colorado River Basin, having been created over the course of the last 50, 60 years before that, and during a period in which Congress chose not to listen to the advice of the head of the U.S. Geological Survey at the time, John Wesley Powell, and created multiple states where one state had been recommended for creation, divided this fragile watershed into 7 states. This area is probably the confluence of all the challenges around sustainability. Before I talk of its history, let's look at what it is. It is home to countless Indian tribes, the 7 states, 2 countries, some of the country's most amazing national parks, including the jewel, the Grand Canyon, which the Colorado River created. It has home now to almost 30 million people. It has some of the country's most productive agriculture that can grow year-round down in the southern areas. In fact, one agricultural district in Southern California alone is responsible for 11% of the country's fresh winter fruits and vegetables. It has 5 major dams on it. 2 are the most significant, which is Hoover and Glen Canyon Dam. Together, they generate over 9 million kilowatt hours of electricity. And with a story that begins in 1922, the largest artificial watershed was created that exists in the United States. Without it, the 30 million people and all the various cities that depend on the Colorado River couldn't exist. In 1922, the states signed a compact on this river system, which was the foundation upon which any of these dams could be built. And in it, they agreed to divide the Colorado River into two basins. If you'll look at the geography, you'll see it starts up in Wyoming, travels through Colorado and Utah, has a major tributary from New Mexico. Those are considered the upper basin states. They're the ones where most of the water originates. It then crosses Lee's Ferry, which is now at Glen Canyon Dam, and traverses into the lower basin to service Nevada, California, and Arizona, and then crosses at both the northern and southern boundary of the Colorado River because of the way the Arizona and the California boundaries work, at both the northern and southern boundary into Mexico, where it is also used heavily not only for agricultural purposes, but also for municipal supply purposes. Now, as it starts up in Wyoming, the first place it leaves the watershed is in Cheyenne. It has been piped and moved out of the watershed over to Cheyenne. Then it gets into Colorado. There is an aqueduct that goes through the Rocky Mountains from the west slope of Colorado, across the Continental Divide to the east slope in the Front Range cities of Colorado and the Big Thompson agricultural area, and enters the Kansas-Nebraska watershed. Go down to New Mexico. It leaves the Colorado River watershed and is pumped over into the Rio watershed to service tribes and to service the city of Albuquerque. Come on down to Utah. It leaves the Colorado River watershed. It is pumped across the Utah desert to the Wasatch Front, where it serves Salt Lake, Provo, Ogden, and the Wasatch Front cities. Travel on down to Arizona. It travels 380 miles from Lake Havasu across the Arizona desert to the central cities of Phoenix, Tucson, Scottsdale, all the central cities of Arizona, and represents one of their major water supplies. At Lake Havasu, it also moves to the west. It moves 600 miles across the California desert to the coastal cities for purposes of serving everybody from Santa Barbara to San Diego. Then it crosses over into Mexico, serving some agricultural areas that actually lie on the Colorado River, but through an aqueduct, it also moves over into Tijuana. Now, because the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California is the big regional wholesaler and is simultaneously connected to the Bay Delta, it extends all the way in impact up to the San Francisco Bay Area. The entire western United States, from Wyoming south and west through California, is interconnected and interdependent. So in 1929, when the Boulder Canyon Project Act was signed, all of a sudden the dams and facilities could be built that would allow this kind of development. I would be safe to say that Phoenix, Scottsdale, Tucson, Southern California, and particularly Las Vegas could not exist in the way that they do today were it not for the construction of those dams. And in that Boulder Canyon Project Act, there was a pecking order. These dams were built first and foremost for flood control. What gave rise were the massive floods down in the Imperial Irrigation District in the late teens, early 20s, that caused much of Southern California to want to start controlling this river system. The second in pecking order of priority is water supply. Power is third, and all other values come after that. Now, when you look at how all these various factors come together, there are any number of endangered species on the Colorado River. The tribes find their genesis in the Colorado River. There is a huge dependence on the power supply from the Colorado River. It's also an enormous recreational area with a whole business, particularly with White River rafting in the Grand Canyon, Lake Mead is the single largest national recreation area in terms of visitor volume. Over 250,000 boats come to Lake Mead every year, which is why we now enjoy the benefit of the quagga mussel, which was brought to us from Lake Michigan on the bow of a boat that was transported from this area, and which has now found a happy home in Lake Mead and in all of Southern California and all of Arizona as a result. What happened in 2000 is we who had come to believe that we had conquered this meager river system, and to put in perspective what the reliance on this river system is versus the volume of water that actually exists in this river system, let me just give you one point of comparison. In 22, they made the mistake of using the 50 highest flow years that had preceded 1922, and they happened to be the 50 highest flow years on that system, and based the allocations on those 50 years of recorded history. They then assumed that there was about 16 to 18 million acre feet of, and an acre foot, for those of you who don't live in the West in the world of obtuse measurements, there's 380 acre feet in a gigaliter. So use that as a point of reference. It's an acre of land 1 foot deep. We live by it, we die by it. We'll never change it. We'll never join the metric world. It's 16 to 18 million acre feet, and where the Mississippi and the Missouri come together, it's 346 million acre feet. Now, these 7 states, with all the people and population, also represent 25% of the country's GDP. So come fast forward to the year 2000. Through tree ring analysis, we had begun to see that we had overestimated what is really to be considered the average runoff or normal runoff of the Colorado River, and now overlay climate change, and the Colorado River Basin became one of the first places to experience a drought that had not been experienced since the white man had moved into this part of the country. Since 2000, we have seen some of the most horrendous hydrology in the Colorado River system. Now, for purposes of that nexus between water and power, Lake Mead is full at sea level elevation 1220, and it's the water supply behind Hoover Dam. Last year, we hit 1083, from 1220 down to 1083. Now, Hoover Dam stops generating electricity at elevation 1050. And much of Southern California and Arizona's power supply is dependent on, especially LA Water and Power, relies on Hoover Dam electricity. This has been a period that has caused us to have to rethink some of the old concepts that we were using in managing this river system. In 2007, the 7 states came together and entered into what can only be called a historic agreement. For the first time, there were early shortages to be declared by the Secretary of Interior for us to cut back the amount of water we use in order to preserve the reservoirs. We agreed to reoperate Glen Canyon Dam and Hoover Dam in such a way as to preserve storage capacity. And quite frankly, this year we've had a very healthy snowfall on the western slope of the Colorado River. And for the first time, we will see additional releases since 1999 actually enter Lake Mead. That would never have happened had we not entered into the 2007 agreement, which changed the elevations and the conditions under which Lake Powell releases water to Lake Mead. We ironically now, because we actually have a good water year, are sitting at a point where the environmental values and the power values are colliding with the water values. In order to move that much water, and you have to understand that lying between Glen Canyon Dam and Hoover Dam and Lake Powell and Lake Mead is the Grand Canyon. In order to move that much water through the Grand Canyon, there are any number of issues around beach erosion. There are any number of issues around endangered fish. But most importantly, from the power supplier's perspective, how to get that much water through the dam and yet not sacrifice electrical power generation has become an ugly juggernaut. It can be released, but it would have to go through the side spillways and therefore not hit the generators at Glen Canyon Dam. And so right now, we have a confrontation between the power users and the water users over what is the more important value. We in the lower basin, who are responsible for water supply to millions of people, we want every drop that we can get from this water year that we're legally entitled to have move through the system and be in Lake Mead by the end of September. The water year runs from October 1st through the end of September, and we want that water moved through. The power generators are saying that cannot be done. You cannot get it through the generators. You will lose a lot of electrical energy potential if you move that much water that quickly through the system. Those are discussions that we actually, quite frankly, are going to be having next week or the week after down in San Diego. The next stool on this was the country of Mexico. If the United States was going to make changes, and we as the users in the United States were going to start taking cutbacks, then the country of Mexico needed to join us. And the 7 states were adamant with the federal government that if the lower basin states were going to experience shortages, then Mexico would have to take a cutback as well. Last year, we spent the entire year negotiating with the country of Mexico. We had a successful completion of those negotiations in December, and under those provisions, Mexico is going to start conserving water in some of their agricultural uses early over the next several years and be allowed to store that water in Lake Mead, but it cannot be taken during shortage conditions. The West is changing, and the reliance, the utter dependence that we have created on this river system, the dams, the water supply, is very difficult to understand in other parts of the country. And it is forcing some enormous paradigm changes in the West. It used to be that these 7 states had a very rich and well-preserved history of warfare. We could pay for more lawyers and run to the Supreme Court faster than anyone else in the country. We have learned that we lack the time to pursue those kind of ambitious lawsuits, and that failure is not an option for us. The economic, the food supply, the environmental, the power supplies are way too dramatic for us to play political games with one another. The 3 large urban suppliers, and now joining us, the 4th large urban supplier, Denver, but Southern California through MET, the Central Arizona Project, meaning all the central cities of Arizona, and Southern Nevada have stopped competing. We are joint venturing common solutions for all of us on a going forward basis. We are spending time and doing a feasibility study right now looking at opportunities to build desalters in Mexico and then exchange Colorado River water upstream to avail ourselves of the use of desalted ocean water. We actually have arrangements that, quite frankly, 20 years ago when I started, would never have happened. We are paying the Central Arizona Project $350 million, Nevada is. And for that, they are storing in their groundwater basins 1.2 million acre-feet of their allocation for our future use. And we will simply effectuate an exchange. Nevada has an arrangement with Metropolitan that's predicated on our very aggressive conservation program. One of the things we've realized in Southern Nevada is that the West can't continue using water the way it has in the past. If the population of the West is going to continue to increase, and it really doesn't matter what demographer you talk to, the people are going to continue to migrate to the West. Every time it snows in Buffalo, the moving trucks start rolling into the Southwest, whether it's into Phoenix, whether it's into Southern Cal, or whether it's into Southern Nevada. The retiree community is growing by leaps and bounds, and obviously the economy of Southern California is still drawing any number of businesses to develop there. This cannot go on the way urban areas have been using water. We use most of our water outside. It's in grass and in landscaping. So Southern Nevada began to pay its customers to take its grass out. Sitting here today, we have rebated to our customers almost $200 million, and we have taken out enough grass to reduce our water supply by 1/3. What did we do with that saved water? We turned it over to our friends in Southern California who were desperate. They had a regulatory drought on the Bay Delta. They had a real drought on the Colorado. They were rapidly approaching a crisis mode. So we turned over all our excess water supplies, whether they were ones that we had bought or leased within the state of Nevada, or whether they were our conserved supplies, and we gave them to our neighbors in Southern California with the understanding that one day we will get them back when we need them. It is that kind of cooperation that is a foundational shift in how we interrelate with one another. All these components and this kind of a protracted drought really push the whole concept of sustainability into a whole new reality. Sustainability for us on both the power and the water side has become one where we are migrating from fierce independence to an appreciated and exploited interdependence. We are hooked together at the hip, whether it's from a power line and power supply perspective, or whether it's from a water supply perspective. This has been an enormous wake-up call for us in the Colorado River Basin. Things are continuing to change. Things are continuing to migrate. The environmental leg of this stool is one that is a daunting